Welcome everybody, welcome to episode 3 of Inktober. Today we've got some more Blender stuff, we've got some experimental stuff. I'm very excited to show you all of that. So without further ado, let's get straight into the first time-lapse. So we're really just jumping straight into it with Blender here, because if you remember last time we actually finished off with Blender. This time we're going straight back in the very next day using Blender once again. Except this time I am considerably better at using it. This time I can actually use the model itself as the Blender as the final drawing, because last time, if you remember, I actually had to redraw it in Photoshop. That being said, yes, I am using Photoshop here, but this will all go into Blender. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm getting this image here that I'm drawing, and it's going to be reflected in the knight's helmet, like he's kneeling down to some long dead king. It's very deep, guys. I'm 14, and this is deep. So I try and get it to reflect in a few ways, but it just wasn't working, and there are actually a couple of reasons for that. One, I had it only visible in the viewport, which meant that it wouldn't appear on reflections. Secondly, more importantly, no reflections would exist, because I was using Eevee and not cycles. I'll explain later on exactly what the difference between them is, but essentially it means that you can't use Eevee if you want to get nice reflections. You notice that big grey rectangular square behind it? Well, that's actually a mirror. Notice how nothing's mirrored? Well, now it is, because I'm using cycles. The mirror behind it actually is just so that I can frame things better without having to constantly change my camera angle, so I can actually see what's happening to the image behind without actually having to turn around. Which is one of those really cool things you can do in 3D modeling programs that you just couldn't really do in other things. So here I'm adding in some area lights so that I can actually see what I'm doing, or to actually see the light coming through the windows. But what's also cool is that those lights actually are providing the light in the image. So there's a sort of natural lighting that you can use within it, which is actually quite cool. And again, another cool 3D modeling thing. If you want to know where I got all this information from, I highly recommend the channel Daniel Craft. It's the whole reason why I even got Blender. It was the whole way I found out that Blender was free, by the way. And it was just so... I watched the videos and I could just see, actually, this isn't nearly as difficult as I thought it was going to be. So yeah, highly recommend that. Here I'm having to redo the cylinder that was the roof, because I accidentally did it on the same object as the shoulder there. Putting in the neck here, and I just wanted to add a bit of shape to it so that it wasn't just a kind of cone. Still isn't perfect, and you can't really see any of the shape because I've shaded it smooth, which I didn't fully understand. Yeah, it's pretty nice. I'm using subdivided cubes for the shoulders, which are essentially spheres, but apparently they're nicer, according to Daniel. But yeah, I just rendered it out. Looked pretty nice. So yeah. Except I didn't, because I didn't like it, so I went back into Blender and I adjusted it. So actually the main reason for this was the fact that I got a massive area light caught in the reflection on the helmet, because again, that thing about visibility in the viewport and visibility of renders and whatnot was a bit of a problem for me. But there are also various minor things that I just wanted to get rid of. For example, I didn't particularly like the shape of the helmet, so you can see that I've actually widened out the middle part to give it a bit more of an interesting shape. On top of that, I'm adjusting things like adding a bit of a rim to the helmet, just to accentuate that shape even more. I wanted it to seem like it had actually been smithed out of something, not modelled in 2020. I don't think it's perfect by any means, and I didn't actually use reference for this much, but I still think it worked pretty well. Definitely as a kind of accent. Definitely better than it was before. A lot of this was just kind of getting it smoother, it looked nicer when it was. But also here I'm just making everything a bit more reflective. Well, not this part, this is more smoothing, but you saw when I was messing around with shaders that indeed I was messing around with it so that it was all a bit shinier. Because actually, without using textures, you kind of need it to be a bit shinier, because otherwise the default shaders just won't make up for the lack of texture. To clarify here, the difference between texture and shaders are that textures are actual kind of image files you wrap around an object to make it look a certain way. However, what shaders do is determine how light actually interacts with that object. So shaders determine whether it's shiny, whether it's emissive, which is where it glows, and whatever. And they do much more complicated things like subsurface scattering. Now, here I purposely made this part very long. You can actually see the real time going past in the top left corner, because this is just showing how long it takes to render out one of these images. But at the same time, I want to use this to talk about the difference between EVs and cycles, so I don't confuse anyone. What EV does is it's really simple, okay? It says if light is coming from a certain direction, it will make the object it shines on brighter, basically, and it will kind of reflect in reflective surfaces, but not very well. What Cycles uses is something called ray tracing, which is where it actually tracks parts of light, or traces rays of light, which means that you can have ultra-realistic reflections, as you can see here, light rays bouncing back between surfaces tons and tons of times. You can get just really nice-looking effects, and that obviously means that it's a bit more computer-intensive, a bit more resource-heavy, but I definitely think it's worth it. The problem is you can't do really animations like that, but still, pretty useful. Here I'm doing this in Photoshop because I want to do just a little bit of drawing in this drawing challenge. So I'm just doing a simple brick background with a bit of a blur behind it. And yeah, really nice. I like this picture quite a lot. Our post was a nice simple one. It had sort of a simple kind of almost Adventure Time vibe kind of thing. I quite like it. I have to say I would say it's probably not unrelated that I did a nice simple picture after I did a 9-hour Blender picture the day before. I think I probably deserved a bit of a break. Once again, I used the gradient technique here, and by the way, that wasn't me being stupid at the start where I couldn't get the gradient to work. It was because Photoshop had a bugged update. It was patched fairly quickly, but it was quite irritating. It was quite fun to try and experiment with this brush. I think simple drawings are really good for that. You know, there's low stakes, not really much pressure on you, but you can just use a nice, try a new brush. So here I'm using this kind of chunky, rough brush. No, I wouldn't use it very often, but for a little style, kind of works. I'm sort of kind of inspiration from Firewatch. That was kind of the basic inspiration for this. I was quite happy with this guy though, because silhouetted figures are a real difficulty for me. I don't know why, maybe it's just the fact that I can't tell. You can't tell exactly the shape. You may have noticed actually, I struggled a bit with it in the first drawing in Fish, in episode 1. I struggle with silhouetted drawing sometimes. I like smooth shapes. Yeah, this is a nice drawing. Simple one, but a nice one. Probably good for a desktop background or something like that. Rocket to me, I don't know, it seemed like a bit of a silly prompt, right? Because everyone's just gonna go in the same direction. Everyone's just gonna draw an arugula leaf. Right, we're all thinking it. Right, so, yeah, for this one, I wanted to be, Okay, I came up with the idea, right? By the way, rocket is the British term, and with other countries use it, rocket is the British term for arugula in America. And yeah, so I wanted to try. I came up with this idea for drawing a rocket leaf because I thought that was quite funny, and you know, in fairness, it was. But no, I won't lie. It's a nice leaf. Like, look, it's a pretty good leaf. Yeah, credit where credit's due. Oh, you're allowed to upload yourself on malicious compliance because this belongs there. I feel. There's lovely shading. This is detail. Okay, let's actually talk about some techniques that I'm using here. I'm using the mixer brush, which I believe I talked about last time, which just allows me to do some nice smooth blending together. This one feels more like an acrylic piece, just in terms of the solid colors and things like that. But it's all basically on one layer, which is quite nice for simple drawings. And just simple shading around the edge. I kind of wanted a nice sunbeam kind of lit picture. So you'll see in a bit where I add that to the table it's on. There you go. This was an interesting thing because I didn't use like any kind of overlays for this, so in a slightly different style I would have used a yellow or an orange or something like that, so golden color, and just overlaid it, or using whatever blend mode, put that over the layer beneath. But because this one's just a one layer picture, I just changed the color that was already the base color to be a little bit more warm, but also a bit brighter. So I wanted to make it seem like it was kind of in a window, or well, not in a window, but the light was coming from a window, which is why you see that sort of cross over the top of it. I think it's a pretty decent effect. There's an ungodly amount of time dedicated to this leaf. I am so sorry. Now we have Storm, and I have to say, I really like the idea of Storm. This was sort of a come up with it the night before kind of thing, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I'm quite done with this idea. I think I might revisit it at some point. The idea is, I came up with this idea of a tree but it's a storm, or storm but it's a tree. Which I don't know, I really like the idea of that. It was sort of Avatar's Tree of Life kind of thing, or the large Leviathan egg in Subnautica. I kind of feel like that kind of thing, and the vines are lightning strikes. But aside from just concept, I actually think I'm really proud of the techniques in this. You see at first here I'm trying to use some lightning brush tools, but I end up not really sticking with them because none of them were really doing what I wanted. So I just use the regular standard oil brush, which I usually use for the last couple of drawings as well. If I was doing this in Sketchbook, there are actually some, that's Autodesk Sketchbook. There are actually some really nice lightning brushes within that, but unfortunately, just weren't cutting it in this one. This was a lot of reference images, and I think it shows, and I actually need to get back into using reference images more because and I've created this sort of system where I don't really give myself many reference images, and which is a shame because so much of my skill comes from that. Like, so much of my drawing ability comes from just heavy usage of reference imaging. Putting in some blue here, which is, I think, one of the touches that really add to it. Because, yeah, I don't know why, somehow the blue just... yeah, it's just a bit of an accent colour, I suppose you'd call it. I don't know all the fancy art terms. Some nice rim lighting there. I think I increased that a bit later on. Here we get the sky coming in here in a minute, and I actually really like what I did with it, and this is one of the best things I can say about recording yourself in time lapses, and one of the best things for me that's come of it is that you watch it back and you see it, because even looking at your own drawings, I never really noticed the sky, and actually I really like the way it looks. I think it actually looks really interesting, and I don't know, the color choices I think were just really good, but I would never would have noticed it if it weren't for the fact that I played it back. I think there's some advice to artists out there I can give, is that isn't really, a lot of the time, for me at least, it's not about using tried and tested techniques. Sure, you do use them, but a lot of the time you're pretty much always in the trying and testing stage. So just keep experimenting, I suppose. Because, like, before drawing this, I didn't know that I was going to draw this. Well, I didn't know how I was going to draw this exactly. But just over the course of it, I did. And you learn so much from yourself in art, and I think that's what's so great about it. I don't know. But I really like this picture. Trap is my least favorite of this video. I will not lie. It's actually, it might be my least favorite of the month. I don't draw people much, and I believe I mentioned that in episode 1 when it came to Throne. Was that episode 1? Episode 2? I've already forgotten. Oh dear, I'll lose my mind. But I don't know, this guy just looks strange, especially when he gets inked in later. Oh yeah, I probably should have made some comment about the giant flower behind him. That's the trap. So I like the concept for this one, and I actually think I quite like the flowers in it. But yeah, he just makes it weird. There's some minor things in it as well that I'm not as big a fan on. I don't think you have to like every single thing that you draw. Now, this isn't really a message that you hear very often, because usually it's about, oh, be proud of what you do, right? And I definitely think that's the case. I definitely agree with that. But for me, that's actually never really been an issue. I've always liked what I draw, and I'm very privileged to have that perspective. But to other people out there who do have that kind of mentality towards it, don't fret about not liking absolutely every single one of your drawings, because sometimes you don't draw as nice a picture. Like I did, and sometimes I like this one, with this one, I didn't particularly like it, and that's not because I'm a bad artist, that's not because I'm not a confident artist, that's just because there are multiple things with it that just don't appeal to me personally. Don't appeal to me as an artist, and just don't appeal to me as a consumer of art. I think his hand's too small, his head's kind of a bit large, his face is ape-like, his eyes in the wrong place, etc, etc. There are things that I can nitpick out of this. I just know what I don't like about it. But that doesn't discourage me, because I know that I can always improve, because I always am improving. But I can also pick things out of it that I do like. Like I like this flower bag here. I probably actually prefer the cute flower. I don't know why, he's just kind of goofy to me, but I quite like it, and I think the shading's super nice on him. What I was doing with this one, I was using the mixer brush tool, but I was just using the standard soft brush, which is something that I've done a couple of times with these drawings over the month. But frankly, I actually think the soft brush thing, although it does work, and you can get some nice things, you can end up having this sort of, I think can end up having the amateur digital artist effect. I've definitely been through that, where everything is using the airbrush tool or whatever. It all just looks ultra smooth. Yeah. Decentish drawing. Definitely not my favourite. Wow! Surprise appearance from John in real life. I wanted to do something a bit different for this one, because for Dizzy I couldn't particularly think of a clever picture to do. I tried coming up with, obviously you think of the birds going around the head thing. I thought it's just, I don't know, it's simple, it doesn't particularly feel like a complete picture, it feels like a frame from a comic or an animation. And that's not particularly what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something that could stand on its own. So I drew Mr. Dizzy from the Mr. Man. It took 22 minutes. So yeah, there is pretty much nothing to say about the actual drawing process. Whilst I thought, I could try to do something a bit different, but I hold myself to a higher standard than that. So I thought a much better use of our time here would be to go through all the various Mr. Men themes from the different series in history, and just talk about those instead, with the time-lapse just happening on screen. I'll be in the corner. Please enjoy the travesty that is whatever the final drawing is of this one. I feel like we've gone in reverse. I started off with a 9-hour Blender picture, and we finished off with a 22-minute picture of a Mr. Man. Like I say, I hold myself to a high standard. Alright, let's go! But first we have the classic. We have the boo boo ba boo boo ba doo da doo. This is the 70s one. This is actually the one that I grew up on. But you may have noticed I did not grow up in the 70s. I'm presuming my dad played this because he grew up in the 70s. But I don't know. I mean, maybe it's the one that he grew up with. I actually wasn't aware it was from the 70s until until I watched it here. So that was the 70s. Now we move on to the 80s, starting off with what is the greatest women's empowerment anthem of all time, and I do mean all future possible anthems. This is the best. It's just incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy with me the Little Miss title sequence song, because oh my god.
Sometimes in sunshine, sometimes in style, sometimes with no time or just with a smile. Up to her eyes in surprises and tricks.
No!
No disguising, she's a little handful of trouble, a bundle of fun. Glad you could make it, so glad you could come. Little Miss, we're waiting for you. Ready, steady, how do you do?
I just love that song, it's so good! The way it just hits that note with up to her eyes! So much welly in that. You go, girl. You go, Little Miss. Jesus. Next we move on to this is like a double one actually, because there's the actual one that they used in the 80s. Not the Little Miss series, the Mr. Man Little Miss series from the 80s. There's the actual one that they used, and then there's the one that they actually didn't use. I probably prefer the one they didn't use, but let's get into both of those.
She's blunt.
He's fat, they're late and naughty, tickle,
She's troubles.
sunshine. We're happy, tiny, neat,
I'm silly,
She's
happy.
She's little Miss Sunshine.
I'm fussy and greedy.
I've forgotten who I am.
I'm Julie.
It's magic.
I'm me.
Buffet.
Dream.
Scatterbrain.
And about
Splendid impossible team, all friends together, the Little Miss and Mr. Man, all friends together, round and round we go, back to back and side by side and on with the show.
I think, that one's fine. It's like just basically going through all the Mr. Men and the Little Misses. I see why they went with that one. It's very helpful. It's very easy to understand. It's quite fast-paced. It's very intense. But now let's go into the one that they cut, because this one I actually think is better.
Mr. This and Mr. That are dropping by for a friendly chat to show you round the Mr. World. Who knows when you're gonna meet that funny little fella with the small round feet? Don't you know they're all about you?
I never did know the lyrics.
Climb down, sit down, pull up a chair. Can't you see the Mr. Men are everywhere? You must not miss your friends, the Mr. Men.
Come on. That's lovely. Friendly little fella with the small round feet. I love that one. I think that's just the Mr. Men are everywhere. I just love I love that somehow the singing's just so genuine. Come on, dude, don't you know they're everywhere? Now, next we have the 90s one. Probably my favorite. I mean, obviously, like the 70s one, sentimental, nostalgic to me. This is actually the last one that we're going to look at, because I don't do the 2008 one for time reasons, and there's not really much to comment on it, because it doesn't really have lyrics apart from the Mr. Men, the Mr. Men, the Mr. Men, and then at the end he goes, the Mr. Man Show! From Mr. Bump. So, let's get into, the 90s one.
Who's acting clever, happy or strong? Naughty, neat, scatterbrained, or just plain wrong? What a crazy cool commotion, Mr. Man and Little Miss. Oh yeah. Well, who's really funny? Who's greedy? Who's small? Who's always in trouble? Who's bouncy? Who's tall? Well, there's never been a group like this, Mr. Man and Little Miss. Well, they're bumpy and bossy, they'll tickle you too. They're dizzy and forgetful, just like me and you. They got every kind of face, every kind of mood. Sometimes so splendid and sometimes just rude. Well, who's always nosy, who's full of sunshine, who's such a chatterbox to drive you out of your mind? Well, there's never been a group like this. Yeah, there's never been a group of friends quite like this. So hold on to your hats for Mr. Man and Little Miss.
I love that one. Freaking yeah. Although I have to say, a lot of those questions, who's acting clever, who's acting shy, he has a lot of questions. It's like, it's pretty easy to tell who's who. Like, it's literally in their names. It's kind of the whole point of the Mr. Men. I'm a little bit concerned you didn't catch on to who's the happy one. It's Mr. Tickle. He's freaking high. just all the time. Thank you for watching episode 3 of Inktober. I'm really happy with how this one turned out, especially armor. You couldn't really get much better than that, though I have to say, I think Dizzy put up a good fight. That is the last you'll be seeing of Blender for a little while. It does appear again later on, but I don't use it very frequently because I discovered that 9 hours for a drawing is quite a long time when you're drawing a picture every day. That being said, next week we've got one of my favourite drawings because it uses my favourite technique that I developed from this, and I'm very excited to share that with you. So please join me next time for episode 4 of Inktober. We're so nearly finished now, and I tell you what, it gets really good towards the end. So thank you for watching, and goodbye folks.